Now, in this section, we're going to talk about Agile Management Coaching, which I've blended together. It's actually a combination of Agile Coaching and Management Consulting. Now, the purists will tell you that it's either or. I'm a pragmatist, and I'm telling you it's both and. And I think I can make a relatively good case before this whole slide deck is completed. I think I can make a pretty good case of why that is the case. Okay? And we'll start with the next slide to get the ball rolling on this section. In this video, we're going to revisit some items that we've already talked about a little bit previously. We're going to look at Agile Coaching and Management Consulting. A lot of Agile purists consider this an either or. I would consider it a both and. You need both the innovation and anticipatory vision combined with operational excellence in order to be able to have an organization that's fit for fight. And along the way, we're going to look at this infinity figure 8 and look a little bit at creative destruction and the abilities that each of these two things bring to the table. Agile coaching is the ability to see, and management consulting is the ability to scale. And in order to be able to innovate and have that anticipatory vision, you need things like Agile. But when you're going to scale it and try to become operationally excellent, you're going to need the other half of the equation. It's a both and. It's both Agile coaching and management consulting. It's not either or. We need the Agile coaching. We need the ideas that come from Agile coaching and from Agile. We need the innovation, the anticipatory vision, and we need the management consulting skills that have everything to do with operational excellence. Remember what I mentioned? If you think about the Sinefin diagram or the Stacy diagram, as you're moving from chaos to complex to complicated back down to simple, all management consulting is taking those various practices and distilling them down to the most simple best practice, because it's a repeatable pattern that the company can do in order to deal with the simplicity, the complexity, the complex, and even the chaotic that happens in their organization every day. And that's the basic foundation of why management consultants exist, is to help companies achieve that simplicity, to help them achieve operational excellence with best practice that can be duplicated over and over again. Now, the Agilists do the same thing, because that's the whole point of Scrum, for example, where you've got your product backlog, and then you have sprint planning, and you create the sprint backlog, and then you go through the sprint with the daily stand-ups, or daily standoffs, as one of our friends from China used to call it. I thought that was pretty good. And at the end, you do a review or a demo, and then a retrospective. And we're going to talk about how to overlay flow on top of that a little bit later, and also in the section on, or the video series that I'm going to do on flow-based Scrum and Agile. Now, a really good example of this figure 8 for innovation, anticipatory vision, and then operational excellence is Nokia. In the early 90s, Nokia was making rubber boots and rubber tires for cars. And they did a really good job of those. Really good boots. They're really well made. and they had their niche in the market. But the leadership team, they're looking around and they went, oh, well, we need to be able to look at what's the future, and is there some creative destruction that we could do and take ourselves into a completely new line of business and achieve operational excellence and be able to satisfy and delight our customers. And they looked around and they went, cell phones. And in 10 or 15 years, Nokia achieved absolutely stunning, remarkable results with a single focus on, we're going to make the best cell phones in the world. And as they built up their brand and built up their organization, they shifted from innovation over to operational excellence. But what's interesting is around 2004, they had in their hands a touchscreen phone with a glass surface. It was roughly the size of an iPhone 5, maybe a little wider, shorter, and a little bit fatter. But in any case, it was a smaller version of a Palm Pilot that had been fused with a Nokia 6100 or a 6 series Nokia, whatever it was. And they had it. They had the touch screen ready to go in their hands. And the leadership, they were at operational excellence. When they asked me about it, I said, hey guys, I drew 3 arcs. I've told this story before. I wrote one at the end of the first arc, and then another arc slightly higher with a 10, and the third arc a little bit higher on the whiteboard with 100. And the executives went, oh, what's that? I said, well, the first Apple will probably sell 1 million units. The second version will probably sell somewhere around 10 million units. Third version, they'll sell 100 million units, and at that point, you're dead. And they laughed at me. They're, oh, Andrew, we own Asia, we own Africa, we own Europe. We deliver 462 million handsets a year. They were operationally excellent. And I just looked at the guys and I said, well, you guys know best. You probably know a lot more than I do. That's why you get the big bucks. And, we'll see. 2 years later, the head of marketing, he was in the meeting. He sends me an email. I think his name was Marco. He goes, Andrew, you were right. I sent an email back to Marco. Marco, what difference does it make? Nobody listened. He sent a note back. Hey, can I share that with your man? I'm like, help yourself. Go ahead. I mean, if nobody listens to the advice, if you've got somebody who had that flash of brilliance where the soft trends, the hard trends came together in their head, they were not just being reactive or proactive or preactive, they were seeing beyond the horizon what was coming. And the guys, when they were mocking me, the leadership, they were like, well, it doesn't even have an alarm clock on it. And the thing that they missed that utterly destroyed them in the end was they couldn't compete with the ecosystem that Apple was creating. Apple created a ecosystem of millions of programmers working for free with the hopes that their application would make them a millionaire. Not Apple, but the programmer. And so all of a sudden, there's millions of applications out there. And there's no way that if Nokia had applied all their resources that they had to try to duplicate that internally, which is what they tried to do, there's no way that they could compete. And they got blown off the market because of arrogance and pride. And so when you're looking at this, and I'm looking at this, and I see Agile coaching, there's a lot of Agile purists out there that are extremely proud. But I've also watched as these startups scale, like Spotify, when they got to 750 people and they're trying to scale up to 3,500 people, they were moving from innovation and anticipatory vision over to operational excellence. Well, guess what? The ways that companies take entrepreneurial organizations and then move over into more mature organizations, now you're looking at operational excellence. Now you're looking at vision, strategy, people, and tasks, which you see there in the middle. And we'll probably come back and talk about that one again a little bit later. But it all has to be driven by vision. And if you miss in the figure 8, when it's time to do creative destruction, it could bode very badly for your organization. So, as we're looking at this, and as I was looking at this, I saw this, another version of this demonstrated at a Agile conference a few years ago. And I realized that, oh wow, you can take the 4D model and apply it to the left and to the right and create an infinite loop. And so with anticipatory vision and innovation, you need to define it, distill it, deliver it, and then drive it by linking it back to the vision that we have there in the middle. And then as the company continues to grow and become more mature, you still need to use the 4D model for all of the projects and programs and processes and business operations and portfolio management that you're going to do. Now you've got a whole nother set of definitions that you need to distill and deliver and drive. And again, driving is linking all of those back to the vision and continually double checking those against the vision. On the left, they define that as the ability to see and to disrupt. And so this is why Agile works so well here. It's managed by pattern. It's an achiever mindset. It's a very entrepreneurial mindset. And so when you're working on the left-hand side, it's all pattern recognition. And as I mentioned earlier, Agilists aren't the first ones to come up with pattern recognition. That has been around for a long time. But because of how Agile works, you're able to more quickly identify the patterns, experiment, see what works, see what doesn't work, and if it doesn't work, you get rid of it. It's pretty straightforward. And so it becomes very agile as they've described it. And so remember that the ability to see is managing by pattern, and it's an achiever mindset. On the other hand, and on the other side of the organization, is the ability to scale. How do we take it from the startup phase and bring it over into the operational excellence phase? How do we take this from 100 people to 500 people to 2,000 people to 5,000 people and beyond? And so then that becomes the ability to scale. When you're scaling, as you're growing your organization, all of a sudden, all these titles start appearing in the company. Chief Technology Officer, Chief Operations Officer, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Executive Officer. All the C-level designations suddenly start to emerge as the company grows in size. And so then you start to get your silos. You might have R&D and innovation together and then you'll have engineering, and then you'll have various types of engineering where you're taking it to prototype stage versus to production stage and so on. As the complexity increases, suddenly you have to start to manage by fact. You'll hear executives talking about we got to run the company by the numbers. Well, if you're running it by the numbers, you're going to be out of business soon. Simon Sinek shared that in a video that he had out there recently. I remember in a book What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School by Mark McCormick, he was talking about how the bean counters had taken over Ford, and they were doing cost cutting all over the place. And finally, a couple of the older dogs in the organization, they yelled out from the back of the room at a meeting, why don't you just close all the plants and then you'll save all the money and we don't have to continue to do anything. And at that point, everybody realized the silliness and the path that they had been going down, that they shouldn't be driven by the numbers, they should be driven by the vision. Okay, but that's why we keep vision in the middle there with the VSPT, because if you're not led by vision, you'll be driven by circumstance. Okay, and so you need both and. You need the ability to manage by pattern, and you need the ability to manage by fact. It's a both and, it's not an either or. And that's the mistake I keep seeing Agilists make over and over again. They want to throw out everybody on management on the right-hand side here, but their solution for operational excellence doesn't meet the needs of the stakeholders further up the food chain. And that's why they keep getting uninvited from program level meetings, portfolio level meetings, or even the C-suite. I even met an Agilist who one time, basically I watched a CIO throw the guy out of the office, out of the meeting, literally, and the Agilist, the coach, the Agile coach, he wore it as a badge of honor. Well, we need to protect the space for Agile, not understanding that he had just done a great disservice to both Agile and what we were trying to achieve for that customer. So that's the difference between being able to wear the Agile coach hat on the left side and the management consultant hat on the right. You better be able to wear both hats and use them equally as well if you're going to succeed in all four areas that need to be transformed. As we're coming into the last section here, you need that ability to do creative destruction. Nokia was given a chance to do creative destruction in 2004 when they had a touch screen phone literally in their hands, ready for production, years ahead of Apple. Years ahead of Apple. If they had done it with their delivery system, if they had been willing to take the risk, they would still be a major player today. Instead, the Nokia phone division was sold off to Microsoft and eventually shut down. Now, I heard recently that they're talking about starting up the Nokia handsets again, and I don't know much about that. I'm really not that interested. But they're like now, what, 15, 16 years late to the party? To me, that's just utterly stunning that happened. So it is utterly essential to have both of these, to have people who can wear the Agile coaching hat and people who can wear management consulting hat. And hopefully your Agile coaches and your enterprise Agile coaches are completely capable of wearing both hats. If they are not capable of wearing both hats, it's going to be extremely difficult to transform your organization, and we go into that a little bit more in the transformation video series that I've already done, transformation using flow. In the way of a recap for this section, your leadership takeaways here. We looked at Agile coaching and management consulting, that it's a both and, not an either or, that you need anticipatory vision and innovation, and then you also need operational excellence and the abilities to see and the abilities to scale. So the application of this, again, we're going to be getting into tough questions. Do you consider yourself a purist regarding, for example, traditional methodologies? I've heard so many people on the traditional side talking down about Agile And I just look at them and I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, they really don't get it. But then on the other hand, I've seen a lot of Agilists that equally don't get it. So in the end, this is a both and. It's not an either or.